Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. Thanks for joining the 18th episode of the DocumentDB Insider Hour. Today, we have as usual, our co-host, Cody Allen, and I'm your host, Karthik Vijayaraghavan. We both are DocumentDB specialist essays who'll be hosting the show as usual. Let me get Cody on the show now. Hey, Cody.
Hey, Karthik, how's it going? That's
Good,
a
man.
different
Good, good.
different background than what I'm used to seeing. Background's a little
Yeah,
bit different as well.
likewise,
It doesn't look like we're
likewise.
in Dallas anymore right now.
We are not just for today. Yeah, so both Cody and I are at the AWS San Francisco Summit. Cody did an awesome talk yesterday. I think it was recorded, so hope you guys will get to see that. So and then we were also supporting some other workshops. So we're flying back today. So if you guys hear our voice fading in and out, that's because of the poor internet connection we are at. So, so we are not at our home office, but we did not want to cancel this show because we've heard feedback from our participants that they get value out of it. So we thought also we had a very good content, a speaker today that wanted to share some of the great work he's been working on. So we thought we'll keep the show on. So Cody, but great job yesterday on the DocumentDB presentation. That was terrific, man.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It was weird. It was one of those silent sessions where you don't hear your voice booming over the speakers. Everybody's wearing headphones and you're speaking and there's five other people on stages next to you speaking. But it was awesome. I loved it. This was the first big summit that we've done in person since the pandemic started. And we saw a lot of folks out there, met with a lot of customers, a lot of peers. It was just so awesome.
Great sessions yesterday, and folks, if you're missing out on AWS SF Summit, please do check out the videos. There are, in addition to DocumentDB, there are so many other topics across databases and other subjects. So it will be a great learning at no cost. So with
And I
that,
think
yeah,
we have AWS Summit Atlanta coming up soon as
that's
well. I
right.
think that's the week of May 15th. So that's
May-
come just around the corner too.
Yeah, that's right. And right after that, the next week, we'll be at the Public Sector Summit in DC. So I think
That's
it's
right. And you'll be there.
I'll be there. I'll be presenting with one of our customers. So that's a lot of busy activities going on. So super excited and super glad that we are able to do this face to face again. Hopefully, at
Absolutely.
some point with our Twitch audience, we'll be able to do this face to face. I just wish we can get there at some point.
I'll challenge our Twitch watchers. If you come to one of our summits and see us in person and you say you've watched us on the Twitch show, there's going to be some swag there for you. So just throwing that out there.
There you go. That's a good challenge. I'll be up for it. Awesome.
Nice.
All right. So Cody, we have an awesome speaker today. Who has been working on some great stuff. Shall we get him on board? What do you say?
Oh man, I can't speak highly enough about the person that's about to join us. So absolutely, let's bring him in.
All right. With that, hey Tim. Good morning.
Good morning. I had the hardware on mute there. Good to see you guys. I'm on the right coast, so just outside of Boston, holding down my own with blue. Tan seems to be the color of choice out on the left coast. Cody, as you mentioned that speaking,
Neutral. Yes.
I've heard that we do that at conferences, and as you mentioned, it sounds like there's multiple stages, and you're talking into a mic, and then in the audience they're facing one of them and hearing just your audio. It reminded me of something just now over the weekend, and you tell me if you guys have seen this before. There's a sport called Omega Ball. Now, have you two heard of this?
I have not.
It's I was on my guide as I was, on my cable TV. It said Omega Ball. It's soccer, like global soccer, with the where you kick the ball into the goal, but there's three teams on a circular field, so three goals. You can score on two, and
Oh
it
wow.
it would blow it reminded me of you speaking at the conference, because if you think about the strategy, right? It just watching it was so wonderful. There's a lot of scoring, but I just like you encourage people to catch up on Cody's presentation. If on the weekend you ever see Omega Ball on your cable guide, give it 5 or 10 minutes, and you have to smile. If you're a soccer fan at all, if you like sports, it's just
Whoa.
ridiculously
So
crazy.
what you're saying is I need to turn these silent sessions into a competitive event, like hostily take over the other stages and present on multiple at
Well,
once. I like this.
possibly there should be counters for how many people are watching each stage, and kind of like everyone gets to do an intro to everyone, and then you try to see what you can draw in. Sure.
Take over their audience. I like it. Omega Ball. I'm going to look this up, Tim. That's awesome.
Oh, yeah, sounds interesting. Cool. All right, Tim. So what do you got today for our audience here?
So the majority of the conversation is going to surround a new version of our compatibility tool. And at the tail end, and we'll do some demos. We'll talk about version 1 and why it was created and what it does, how it works. And then we'll dive into the features and changes for version 2. And kind of, again, with the demo, look at some examples and what it enables. And then at the end of that, I want to talk about some utilities that I would say, let's say they're in the lab. They're still a little bit of a work in progress. They've added value with customers or people evaluating DocumentDB. So I'll kind of walk through the concepts of them, probably come back in a later month and start highlighting with demos additional tools that are being created. But within the team, and Karthik, Cody, you're participating in this. We definitely have an ongoing initiative creating tooling and utilities, and my specialty is more, I think, kind of one-off external tools. And Karthik, you created the failover. You could call that a tool, but it's more productized, more like a product. So I think maybe every other month we should probably take part of this hour, carve off some time, talk about what we're working on, ideas we have for things we haven't started, and then hopefully solicit some feedback. Everything we do is on GitHub, so anyone on the planet is welcome to create an issue and or a pull request if you want to try to add a feature to an existing tool. I got my first PR for one of these tools a couple weeks back, which is exciting. I mean, it's nice that it shows a person investing some time to try to make the tool better, which is what open source is all about.
Yeah.
So we have, I got to point something out here. We, like most companies, we have an internal communication system. That we chat with each other throughout the day, just send each other messages. And I get hints of things that Tim's working on, just little snippets here and there every once in a while. And I swear, Tim, you have a skunk works going on. Like you have your own private warehouse of these cool tools, these really awesome things that you're building, and you're just releasing little bits to me. So I can't wait to see what you're ultimately going to build. What is that stealth fighter that you're working on now that we're going to be able to present in a couple of weeks? Because I know it's going to be pretty cool.
Great, yeah, and the compatibility tool V2, on a Friday morning, I was on a call with a customer, and when we talk about one of the most interesting features we added, it came up on the call, and the customer just wondered or thought out loud about something, and I connected the dots. And then that afternoon, Cody, you kind of dared me. I said I could rewrite the tool in 2 hours, and you said I dare you. And 90% of the work to get that main feature took about 45 minutes, and it's the classic 90-10. The other 10% of the work, clean up and proper command line arguments and such, and testing, took the other 90%. So all in, it was probably a 6 or 8 hour effort. But yeah, that's one thing that's great about our team is we kind of do challenge each other at times to, whether it's a tool or a presentation or support, whatever comes up. It's sometimes the camaraderie and almost daring someone to get it done is a good motivator.
So to be clear, though, the challenge was 2 hours. You said it took 6, so you failed my challenge. I want to be clear on that, right?
Well, I had to keep going. I had my own feature creep. I try to reduce that, but there definitely was a little bit of feature creep that you'll see when we do the demo.
Right. And I think the most important thing there that you're talking about is this came up from a communication with the customer. This is an offhanded comment, right? It's diving deep into that. One thing that we say at AWS is 90% of what we build comes directly from customers' feedback. We listen to what they want and we invent on their behalf to make sure that we're not building the features we think they need, but we're building the features that they've asked for. So I think this absolutely embodies that. These tools are purpose built to answer those challenges, to give solutions to those tough challenges that our customers are running into with migrating DocumentDB, or compatibility questions, or just offhanded, man, it would be a lot easier if I knew this. Well, here you go. Here's a tool for it. So I think, this definitely focuses on the right things, and it's in alignment with how we operate at AWS.
Yeah, and the remaining 10%, the 90-10 that you were talking about, Cody, the remaining 10% is reading between the lines, right, to basically understand what the customer would need and building it for them. So yeah, that's the fun part of the job, which I take pride on, right, in helping customers. And while you were talking, Cody, looks like somebody from the audience, I'll just post this comment here. When you said he failed the challenge, this is the comment that came on. So it already has supporters out there. So mind you, Cody.
I like the username there. Is that a little bit like, is McDonald's going to start selling potato skins? It's a great name.
Fair, it was completed. It was an awesome tool. So McSkins, I will give him that. He won this challenge.
Yeah. So yeah, he also says that it was polishing. So it doesn't count towards the time taken for the challenge. So Tim has some ardent supporters out there, Cody. So be careful.
I'm gonna have to choose my words carefully now.
I know, right?
Where's Team Cody?
Yeah, awesome. So Tim, so I know that you have some content to present before you go into the demo. Is that right?
Yep. Yeah. If you can turn on my my screen share.
All righty. Let's see what you got for us here. Compatibility V2. Okay.
Be a very concise presentation. So for starters, I called it V2 because it was pretty dramatic change here to the compatibility tool itself. But I think it's important to think about version 1 and why. Why was it created? Worth noting is, Amazon DocumentDB, we support MongoDB APIs, the shapes, those are Apache 2.0 licensed, meaning the SDKs work. I use PyMongo a lot with Python for connecting. The tools work. We use the same wire protocol. So Mongo Dump, Mongo Restore, the new Node.js-based Mongo Shell, they all work just fine. However, we don't yet support all operators or aggregation stages. We support quite a few, but not all. And as Karthik mentioned about feedback from customers, or Cody, we keep adding support for additional operators and aggregation stages based on customer feedback, working backward from customer needs. So as we talk to customers, as we talk to potential customers, we take notes, and we keep track of most requested features. And that helps guide the roadmap as we add them going forward. So the original compatibility tool, as best as I can tell, it was created to give a high-level view of your application's compatibility. So you have an application, it's currently running on MongoDB, you're considering migrating to Amazon DocumentDB, and you're concerned about compatibility. Do we have support for all the operators that you're using in your system? So that was the goal of the tool. Important to note here, and Karthik, I will always dedicate this bullet to you. I bring it up every time I talk to a customer. The compatibility tool is not a substitute for correctness or performance testing. So it's a great tool to get in there, first blush, run it on your code. Sometimes, see what you're up against. If there's some incompatible operators that we don't yet support, oftentimes there's workarounds that we can put in place while you're waiting for that operator to exist. But it doesn't, if the compatibility tool in its current form or prior form came back with a big thumbs up, it doesn't mean don't test your application. It means just you're probably ready to test your application, and either manually or through automation, go in there and start the testing process.
Right. And just a brief history lesson, Tim, this was before your time, right? When we came up with that tool. The reason for that was, customers, before they invest their time to determine if, they should even migrate from MongoDB into DocumentDB, they had like no way to estimate or gauge like, what's going to be the effort, how much of compatibility gaps do we have, because there are articles out there that says, oh, DocumentDB is only 20%, 30% compatible, and so on. But in reality, what we feel, and working with so many customers, what we have seen is, DocumentDB has the APIs and operators that our customers really want, right? We focus more on that than being compatible on a per operator or a per API level, right? So we are compatible for what our customers want, but there was no way for customers to see that for themselves without putting in a lot of effort, right? They had at least had to dedicate one sprint in their agile cycle. So the ask from customers were, hey, can we get some quick and dirty solution that we can at least show, prove to ourselves as well as to our management that compatibility is really not a problem because DocumentDB supports everything. So that's how this whole thing, the whole idea was developed. And certainly you have like enhanced it like anything from there. But that's a little bit history there on why this tool came into existence in the first place.
Okay. So a little bit about the the mechanics under the covers. How did testing compatibility with the version 1 of the tool work? So it was essentially a 4-step process. Step 1 was on your MongoDB server, where you're running your real live workloads. You want to enable profiling, and this is classic MongoDB query operator profiling. The difference is at that profiling level 2 with a slow MS of -1, it's going to profile everything. So generally people use this profiler for, I want to find slow operations and slow queries, and they might say, I want to catch a query or an operation that runs for more than 200 milliseconds or 1 second, and I want to capture 10% of those as they come through to try to filter it out. So the profiling has existed for a very long time. If you're going to check compatibility, you need lots of data. You don't want to miss things because it ran in under 50 milliseconds. You need to make sure all operations are being logged and therefore can be scanned. So again, after you enable the profiler, I say here, capture as much of your workload as possible. And this is where it's a little bit tricky. Oftentimes workloads have cycles. There might be reporting that doesn't run until the end of the month. There might be operations that only occur on Saturday morning where you're, I don't know, creating new collections or doing some roll-ups. So the goal here, it's kind of like code coverage with testing. You want to capture as much of the workload as possible, knowing that you can't just turn profiling on and leave it running for a month. That's probably going to create just volumes and volumes of log files. So do your best. You can certainly do a capture Monday and a capture Saturday, kind of create a bunch of log files for the process. Once you're there and you've got your logs the way you want them, just turn it off or put it back to what it was. Often customers have profiling on again to catch slow queries. So if that were the case, you'd want to set the profiling level and its associated parameters back to what they are under normal operating conditions. And then lastly, the whole point of the compatibility tool was to scan these profiled logs. And in a moment, we'll jump into a demo to take a look at how that works on various types of logs. There's different scenarios I want to show as part of this demo for compatible versus uncompatible, and then some of the logging issues that the compatibility tool struggled with for certain conditions.
Now, Tim, enabling and disabling profiling on their MongoDB servers, is that a disruptive change? Like, does that require a service restart?
It doesn't require a restart. It will consume resources, right? So as these queries are being profiled, wherever your logs are being stored, likely directly on the Mongo server or on attached storage, it's going to be doing I/O, and it's going to be consuming space. I would say I/O consumption should probably be less of a concern than space. If you never want to run out of space on a server of any sort, database servers especially. So you want to keep an eye on your space. And again, if your workload is doing 100,000 queries per second, you want to be careful, and you might want to look into one of the options of setting the profiling level is to tell it the percentage of queries that go over that time that are logged. So for certain workloads, you might want to be capturing a lower than 100% of the operations and query workload.
Yeah, good call out. The performance impact and definitely the space issue. If you're going to run it for a longer period of time, to bullet point two, if you need to capture a week's worth of logs, just be cognizant that that is going to take up some space.
Mm-hmm.
But also to that point, Cody, I have had customers that have a pretty exhaustive test suite, which ensures that they have code coverage, right? So if you have such a test suite, then you don't really have to worry about the size of the log, because just in one run, if you're going to cover, let's say, all your microservices and all the flows within those microservices, it should be that's more optimal in terms of A, you're running it in a lower environment, and B, you're running it for a shorter period of time, so you don't have to worry about the log size. So that's one of the best practices, right? Totally unrelated to what DocumentDB or MongoDB is. It's just application development best practices on how you should be testing it.
Agreed. And if you have that, with these logs, the more the merrier.
Yeah.
You can have those. You can capture some logs in production, throw them all in one directory, and have the compatibility tool check as many logs as you can throw at it. You might even catch a person running an ad hoc query in production or in test. You never know what you're going to find.
Is there a limit on how many logs the tool can process?
There's not. You just put them in a directory, and it's going to iterate them one to n.
Got it. Okay.
Okay, so let me clean up my screen a little bit here and make the font larger. A couple scenarios I want to look at with respect to version 1 and some things that were improved for version 2. So one of the first things that can occur, we're turning on profiling, and as it is with most systems or applications, there are limits. So one of the limits on a MongoDB server with respect to profiling is how many bytes it's willing to log before it truncates the log line. So if you insert a 1 megabyte document, for example, and you have profiling enabled the way we talked about here, that entire 1 megabyte document is going to want to be logged. By default, a MongoDB server is only willing to create log lines of 10 kilobytes or less. So in that example of a 1 megabyte doc insert, it's going to have to truncate the insert command and the actual data that's being inserted down to that 10 kilobyte mark. And the way MongoDB accomplishes this in logging is it truncates it in the middle. So it has a pretty complete looking log line, but somewhere in the middle, you're going to see ... where it cut out all the excess. And off to the left, it'll give you notification that the line you're looking at in the log has been truncated. There is a setting you can raise, max log size KB. As far as I know, it's not dynamic, so you set that at startup. I don't think you can change it on a live running server. But that's how, if you wanted to go bigger than 10 kilobytes per log message, you could increase it there. But if you have big enough operations, the 1 megabyte document is an extreme, but think about if you're bulk inserting a handful of rows, those could potentially roll over the log size as well. So to see what that looks like with the tool, I have a renamed version of the version 1 tool here called Compat V1 right here. And one of the things that I've improved on V2 as well is kind of named parameters for this utility. Right now it's positional. So the first argument is what version of DocumentDB to check compatibility for, either 4.0 or 3.6. The second argument is either a file, a log file to scan, which in this case is MongoDB log line, longline.log. And then the third parameter is for log output. So when it runs, it's going to put data into a handful of files with what it finds in particular. So super simple scenario here, which is we logged a line that was bigger than the default 10 kilobytes, and you're going to see what occurs there. So the version 1 of the tool, it's skipping that line, as you can see right here, due to truncation. And the reason for that is the way the version 1 tool worked. It has expectations about the payload in the log line, and it's very specific about where it's looking for operators, for example. So in the example I gave you where it's going to truncate the actual operation in the middle with 3 dots, uh, the JSON won't be formatted in such a way that it can be used. You're going to lose potentially field names, one set of double quotes. Something is going to happen so that we can't actually take the JSON of the operation and using proper JSON structure, walk through it and find out what was going on that line. So this is an example of line got truncated, so it needed to be skipped as part of the evaluation process. Now, most workloads, it's not like every single log line is going to be 10 kilobytes plus. So you might have an example where you do a bunch of logging, and at the end, you run this the scanner on it, and instead of every line being skipped, it's going to deal with the lines and check for compatibility when it can, and skip the ones that it can't. The next issue that can occur in logging is unescaped embedded double quotes. So this is an issue that was dealt with in MongoDB 4.4 and above. So prior to 4.4, if you inserted a document and the document had embedded double quotes. So let's say you were inserting a document, field A, and field A was double quotes, and then you did slash, a backslash escape, double quotes, and a word, and escaped it again. If you wanted to get double quotes in your document, the only way to do that is to put an escape, a backslash in front of the double quote field. The issue was in MongoDB up to 4.2, when it logged that operation, the escape character doesn't make it to the log. So you end up with bad JSON. You've got double quotes, double quotes, double quotes, double quotes before the next field comes along, and it ends up being invalid JSON and can't be dealt with properly. So similar to the example we just looked at right there, if we have unescaped double quotes, we have to skip that line as well. It's we declare it invalid JSON. We're basically taking the payload that Mongo put in the log, and we're trying to load the JSON into a dictionary, and that process is failing due to invalid JSON. So again, in version 1, when and if you had embedded double quotes, don't see a lot of that in production, but it definitely, since I came here, I added this feature because a couple customers reported not being able to use the tool. It was actually crashing the tool at the time. So in this example, we have to skip that line again because it's not properly formatted JSON. And then the last example, kind of something that's been improved, is just coming across a log line that's unrecognizable. So one example here, I'm going to use a log from MongoDB 5.0. As I mentioned, that unescaped double quote problem was fixed in MongoDB 4.4. And in MongoDB 4.4 and above, the log lines actually, instead of being a handful of white space delimited fields and then some proper JSON, the entire log line in 4.4 and above is now fully JSON. Easier to parse, cleaner. Internal double quotes are escaped properly. But the existing tool was expecting a timestamp in field 1, or if you logged, if you had some carriage turn line feed in your data and that got logged, it ended up on its own log. So it could definitely cause the tool to be unhappy when it wasn't able to process the lines it saw. So this is a very big file here, but it's MongoDB 5, and the tool supported up to and including MongoDB 4.2. So in this example, you can see 272,179 lines were skipped. And this one's declared an unrecognized log format, meaning the very beginning of the line should be a recognizable timestamp. And because the payloads are JSON only going forward, it doesn't know what to do with that line. So it just skips it. Lastly, just to show, an example of the normal use case, which is we have good, clean log data that we can deal with. I have a very simple log that I created here, and an operator I like to pick on quite a bit whenever we talk about compatibility, and it's my friend Square Root. So I had a Mongo server running. I turned on logging. I went in with Mongo Shell. I ran an aggregation that had $square root in it, and when you run it through this compatibility tool, version 1 of the tool, it comes back and lets you know that, by the way, $SQRT is not yet supported by DocumentDB. Karthik, are you back okay?
Yeah, there was some Wi-Fi glitch here.
Okay, so this is 99.9% of the customers who were using the tool don't have log lines. They're not running MongoDB 4.4 and above, and they don't have embedded double quotes. So the goal of the tool was this, what you're seeing right here, right? We get a customer, they would normally have a lot more lines for logs right here, but the tool parses them, looks for unsupported operators, comes up and tells you $SQRT is there, and it saw it once. It also, the existing tool would talk about query types, so finds versus aggregations, and you'd get counters of how much of that it saw in your data as well.
Tim, is there a limit on the file size?
No, it's iterating a line at a time. It's doing batching behind the scenes to be efficient.
Right.
The limit is just your time. I mean, you saw in that example 270,000 lines on a decent EC2 server. Took 20 or 30 seconds to get through that, but it's pretty efficient in terms of scrolling through the lines themselves, parsing the operators, and then checking for compatibility operator by operator.
Okay, cool.
All right, so that was version 1. I have 2 slides about version 2. I have need versus want, right? So when we talk about minimum viable product, or what I got done in 45 minutes, I tried to set aside, like, what did I really need to do, and then what could I do building on top of that. One was, I had a handful of folks reaching out to me, internal or customers, and they're running MongoDB 4.4. Some of them are running MongoDB 5.0. Those versions of Mongo are adding new operators, and certainly those are operators we don't support yet. We're only up to and including operators and aggregations that exist in 4.0, and again, we're a subset of that, working backward from the most important APIs and aggregation stages. But some of our customers are running newer Mongo, but not using newer Mongo functionality, right? You could run an app that runs on 3.6, runs just fine on 4.4 or 5.0. So they had logs from this new version of Mongo, and in 4.4, Mongo changed the logging format, and that broke the tool. So, when I started to look at that problem, I thought to myself, well, I can write a smarter parser that detects what type of log am I looking at and keep going in the same path. The goal there was just helping customers and users and internal folks be able to scan newer versions of Mongo logs for compatibility. I wanted to come up with a technique where I could not have to deal with these skipping lines, right? So we talked about lines getting truncated because they're bigger than 10 kilobytes. And in that example, it'll still be truncated. We can only search for what we find in the log, but it's better to me, I'd rather parse as much of the line as possible than just skip the line entirely. The embedded double quote issue, I wanted to try to find a way to make that go away. And these unusable formats, right? No matter what I see in the log, I should do my best to check if it was logged. Are there any potential compatibility concerns with that? And again, the reason it was skipping lines was that the initial version, it had very strict expectations of format, timestamp, a few other white space delimited fields, and then a payload. Because that, the goal of the tool was that, like, let's check these versions of MongoDB for compatibility via the logs themselves. So that was the need. And then, building on that, I thought about what other improvements can I make while I'm in there? Can I simplify the code and then add functionality while doing as good or better than the version 1 tool was doing prior? And again, sometimes things like this, they just take time, right? When I did V2, I was about a year, maybe 13 months into my time at DocumentDB, having talked to lots of customers and seen things. And sometimes, to Cody's point, that most ideas come to us from customers, and someone was just asking, could the tool do something? So other improvements I made, I like to keep things as compact as possible, so it's easier to just take one file and go. The original, the V1 version of this had a file for the scanner and a file for operators and whether or not they were compatible. My goal and what I did here was I combined them into one. I took the compatibility, and if you look at the new version of the tool, the compatibility info operators are within the tool file itself, and you can go back and forth on this, right? By keeping them separate, it's got some positives and negatives. By bringing them together, it's got some positives and negatives. One way I looked at this is it's extremely rare that we need to add more operators. If it was much higher velocity, it would probably be safer to keep them in a second file. And to Karthik's point, on the long-term roadmap here, I do have tests coming. So I want to make sure that if I want anyone on the team to feel comfortable submitting a PR or even a customer to add an operator that we didn't have there and feel comfortable, we can run tests on that PR and declare that it's okay to implement it versus waiting for a customer to report an issue down the road. I was able to remove any external Python requirements. So the V1 of the tool, because it was extremely strict about parsing the logs, was using mtools, which is part of PyMongo, which requires a pip install. So to keep it a little cleaner, I was able to change the technique for scanning such that mtools was no longer needed. So Python, if you got Python on your system, hopefully 3.7 and above, you grab the one file tool and you can just start scanning. I added proper argument handling, and prior to Amazon, I didn't do this that often, but these tools are more public facing, so I'm finding I'm adding them to all my tools whenever I go in there. So tac directory, if you're scanning a directory, having required fields, having optional fields that have default values. It's a lot cleaner than having these positional command line arguments in place. I think the biggest change was updating the scanning technique. So to just give a brief overview, the version 1 opened a log file, found a JSON payload, and then it walked through the keys of the JSON payload because the keys of that JSON were likely to be operators or aggregation pipeline stages. So it was very strict about take the JSON, put it in a dictionary, which could contain dictionaries all the way down, and walk through all that data. Every key, it would look for, is that key a dollar operator or a dollar stage that I have or don't have compatibility for? So it took the approach of the log drove the process. In the rewrite, I turned it the other way, which was we have a known list of operators. We know which ones we're compatible with and which ones we aren't. So let's reverse the script. Let's take a line out of the log file. And in that line, let me take every single operator I know of, compatible and incompatible, and let me search, does the operator exist in the log, as opposed to, is the operator in the log compatible? So it kind of reverses the direction for the scan itself, super carefully as well, right? Because you want to be careful you don't have operators that are a substring of another operator, and therefore you might get a false positive. The real win here, it certainly simplified the code and made it less brittle to how the format of the log data. I think the real win was now we can scan source code. So rather than only being able to scan log files, if you're building an application, you have the source code. If you're using open source components, you can get the source code. So for any app you have source available, you can still do logging and check your logs, but you can also scan the source code using the tool, the version tool of this tool going forward.
Hey,
So
Tim.
whereas version 1 was very sensitive to timestamps, it was very sensitive to proper JSON format, it was very sensitive to the changes from 4.4 and on up. This, since it's not sensitive to that, it doesn't matter if it's in that standard log format. It can be, like you said, source code that's going through line by line looking for those individual operators.
Correct.
That's awesome.
Hey, Tim, quick question. Is there a reason that you have to check even the compatible operators? Wouldn't it be sufficient just to check for incompatible operators to help with
it's optional. One feature I'll show you on what version 2 can do, and I know I'm not supposed to say that's a good question, but it's a good question. This tool, one thing I found when it's kind of a negative thing to check for compatibility and only tell people what we don't do. So the new version of the tool has a tac show compatible option, and if you turn that on, it checks both incompatible and compatible. And at the end of the scan, instead of only showing you what we don't support, it also shows you what we do and how many times we saw each operator. So you get both. Optionally, you turn it on. But I found, like, it's one of those things where it felt kind of negative to only show, hey, we don't support $SQRT, without also saying, but here's the 40 operators in your logs or your source code that we absolutely do support, and how many times I saw each one.
Got it. Okay. So I'm just trying to, as a customer, I'm thinking about, like, why and when and how this would be useful. So one use case would be, if I have to go back to my management, I'm a developer working for XYZ company running this tool. If I have to go and tell my management, that, hey, I ran this, and instead of just telling them 2 operators were not compatible, now I can tell them, hey, 99% of what we use is compatible. So is that a good way
That's
to think?
a good comment, because you also you made the comment earlier about how much compatibility we have right now, and again, 100% of the functionality that our customers are asking for, and I think it's a real positive thing to show both, right? If you scan your code and we're 99 operators we're not compatible with, we're only compatible with 1. I think we're going to have a conversation about whether or not at the moment DocDB is a good fit. But to your point, I think it's good to have. And again, with the simplification of the code, the feature was very easy to add. All it's going to do is add time, because all those compatible operators are also going to check. But again, on a decent piece of hardware, I'll show you. I grabbed Morphia, which is an ORM, and I'll run a code scan on that here, and you will see how fast it goes with the compatible operators turned on.
That's very useful. I think that'll help answer these kind of questions and help build confidence, right? Like on what the real compatibility is. I like that.
Yep. Another feature here, single file, that existed in the old one, directory. But on this one, I added recursion to the directory because we're doing source code. The V1 you could put all your logs in a directory, but now you're definitely going to want to recurse. Some languages more than others like to have lots and lots of directories embedded within directories. And you can also include or exclude certain file extensions, depending on your needs. It automatically, if you don't do this and it comes across something binary that it struggles with, it moves on. It has proper exception handling. So when we do the Morphia test, I think you'll see like PNG, like image files or zips would be excluded from the scanning process because they're binary in nature. So again, when we see this in the demo, you'll see how it handles those types of conditions. So same thing as we did with V1. Let's do a quick demo, kind of run the same examples we ran before, and then a couple new ones. Obviously code scanning is different here. So here, the tool is compat.py, which was the old version of the tool, in the same place. Here we're going to use the file option instead of directory, and we're going to process the log that has log lines. So an operator was fired. It was bigger than 10K, and this tac show supported is just going to do the opposite of, I'll tell you about incompatible, but I'll also tell you about compatible operators.
You are still on your V1 directory, though.
Oh. File. Oh. Better redo my cut and paste.
Live demos always go perfectly, Tim. Don't worry.
Third time will be a charm. All right, so on the long line, it was able to process, and I think that long line was boring. It didn't actually have any operators in it. I think it was just garbage data. So that one is not very exciting, but the embedded double quotes, I think, important for users who have that use case. So I'm running on a file called unescaped, where I'm having embedded double quotes. I processed one file, found no unsupported operators, but because I'm using the show compatible option, it's saying the following one supported operators were or was found. So $in is up there, and it was found one time in that line itself. Quick example on a MongoDB, a newer version. We'll use that MongoDB 5.0 log file here. So MongoDB 5.log. I think that's a pretty big file. To your point, Karthik, about performance, I think when I ran this example earlier, it was probably 2x or 3x faster. So absolutely, checking for compatible is going to slow it down some, and the technique, because every operator, rather than saying, "Hey, I have an operator, are you compatible?" It's saying for every at least unsupported operator, are you in this line of the log file? So there, good news. Customers using MongoDB 5.0 didn't find any unsupported operators, but did find 6 supported operators, and some of these are interesting. $and, $LT, $set, greater than being output there.
Yeah, so this is interesting, right, Tim? Because I have customers that ask me, "Hey, I'm running on MongoDB 4.4, but DocumentDB supports only, MongoDB 4.0, or DocumentDB is compatible with only 4.0." This is a great example here, right? Like you have like MongoDB 5.0 on the source from where you got the log, and parsing those logs. We are seeing that there's not a single operator that this workload uses that DocumentDB does not support, meaning they can migrate from that 5.0 version of MongoDB into DocumentDB 4.0 with no issues.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's I think it's hard to understand at times for certain customers because they strictly go by the numbers. But on the AWS side, we care less about those numbers. It's more about what really matters to our customers. So if you're using 4.2, 4.4, a lot of times what I've seen, Tim, is customers are asked to upgrade so that they don't reach that end of life. I believe even 4.0 of MongoDB is coming to end of life. I don't know the date. Cody or Tim, if you guys know, chime in. But
end of this month.
Okay, I didn't know it was that quick, but okay, good to know. So if it is 4.0 that's end of life, and customers are on 4.2, 4.4 just to stay supported, it's okay. Run this tool, you'll know what version, what operators and APIs are supported, and you can simply migrate to DocumentDB. Even though the engine version is 4.0, your operators and APIs are supported, so your workload will work just fine.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree. I think oftentimes customers move to a newer version, MongoDB, MySQL, name your database. The application oftentimes is unchanged. They don't have the time to re-engineer or do extensive testing on re-engineering. They just want to do quick compatibility testing and move forward. So yes, there definitely are customers running newer versions of MongoDB and not using any unsupported operators. To show one example of what happens when we get an unsupported operator, my friend Square Root is back here. So found the unsupported operator square root. And when it finds unsupported operators, it's going to give you a breakdown. So it found square root one time, and it's going to show you the name of the file that it found and the line number within the file. On that one, different than V1, it's also finding that, hey, even though I see square root, that was an aggregation. Aggregations have $project. $project is supported. Found that one time. Worth noting, Karthik, you might be noticing this right now. So one thing this tool does not do that the old tool did that's been changed is actually taking the lines it finds either in logs or code and writing them to its own log file. And the reason for that is I kind of went back and forth on this a little bit about, since it's scanning code now, potentially extracting code from A and putting it in B, and then having kind of like lifting code out of where it was and putting it somewhere else without the customer or user really thinking about what's going on there. So I took the technique more of, hey, there's the line, and I could write that to a log file if it made sense, to help them have a checklist of, let me check these lines on these files to potentially use a workaround for an unsupported operator.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, especially when you're scanning code. Yeah, all the IDs come with the line number, so it's super convenient to go back and figure out where the mismatch was. Makes sense.
And in my last example, and I think this is where the ability to scan code gets interesting. So working with a customer, they're using an ORM for Java called Morphia. I mean, lots of languages have lots of ORMs. This tool is agnostic to code bases, whether it's JavaScript, Java, Python, C. I don't foresee a language where the code scanning technique isn't going to work. But this is an example. The customer was running Morphia, and you're not just running Morphia, you're running a specific version. They were running 1.2.1, which I think is rather old. There's much newer versions in the 2.x region. And same thing, we were having the conversation about compatibility. And ORMs are interesting. So we'll run the code scan and then we'll kind of have a brief conversation about it. So in this scenario, we're scanning the directory that Morphia source code lives in. And some things we can talk about, what popped out. So we processed 902 files from the Morphia jar. We skipped 57, and those will be noted below. Those were skipped because of they're all binary data and unscannable. So in the scan, we found 8 unsupported operators. $near is the old implementation of geospatial. We support nearsphere, so there definitely are some workarounds for some of this. Center and center sphere. We don't yet support text indexing. $polygon goes with some geospatial functionality. Unique docs and where. So for each of these 8 unsupported operators, it's going to show you the operator. It was found 13 times, every file. This particular file, it found it on multiple lines, and those are all going to be laid out right there. So this section, you get all the unsupported operators and the details. 61 operators were found that are supported. So geo within, mod push, group, add to set, how many times we found each of them. So to your point, Karthik, about really showing this comparison, how compatible is something. And then after that, it's going to show the skipped files. So here we have a PNG, a JPEG. I don't know what a WOFF is. It must be some kind of binary data representation. So the one thing that makes this interesting is Morphia is an ORM, as are others. So Morphia generically has $near, $box, $center, It's got geospatial functionality, some of which is older and not currently supported by DocumentDB. So with an ORM, it's a little trickier in that you have to do more testing, because if you're not using its geospatial functionality, the fact that it has $near likely doesn't affect your use case. So if it's all your source, it's one thing. If you're using an ORM, there's a little bit more to the process to make sure, are the unsupported operators actually ones that you use in your usage of the ORM itself?
And this is where the functionality testing comes in, right? Like for that specific workload, because not many customers use, let's say, text or geospatial. It's not very common. Even though customers use it, it's not very common. So but the framework, like Morphia or others, they have to support anything and everything, right? So it's important to understand what the difference means. Tim,
this is a great example of scan the code and scan your logs, because your logs won't lie. They'll tell you what you're using within.
Yeah, it makes sense. The line number is really helpful. Would it be possible to log that into an output file? Like, what I would like to see there is, hey, here is, just for the incompatible operators, right? Like, here is the file name, and here are the lines for this file. I know you write it in the output here, but since our customers are used to seeing that log file, it probably would help so that they can then, because a lot of customers have their, their on-site offshore model, they can just ship it out and say, hey, fix these lines, right? So just a thought.
I will create a GitHub issue for myself, Karthik.
Okay. Thank you.
Last thing worth noting here
and you
is
can always just output it through terminal too, right?
Yeah, you could just greater than into a file, and but then you're going to get everything, not just that nice tight section itself.
It helps with formatting aspect. That's pretty much it.
So last thing to note here before we talk about some kind of tools to come or works in progress is It's also useful for detecting dead code. So a customer I've used this with, when they scan their own code, they noticed an operator that wasn't supported, but this is a customer already running DocumentDB. And it was a great moment for them where they had that light bulb go off to say, oh, we still have some dead code we need to remove from our code base. So it was code that you could never reach in their production workloads, but it still existed in their source code. So it was kind of like a linting process for them to be like, oh, okay, I've got to get back to taking a peek at why that code is still existing in our live code base that might actually accidentally get triggered at some point. Where do you find it? We've got a GitHub that's maintained by the three of us and others on our team. So it's in AWS Labs, within that Amazon DocumentDB tools. That's where you can find the compatibility tool, other tools we're working on. That's where our scripts and utilities go to live and be used. We have a couple more minutes. I wanted to talk about some upcoming tools, works in progress, things that are partly baked or mostly baked, and just looking for probably in the polish stage. This first one I call Oplog Review, and this was important for customers when we're talking to them about their workload, and we want to know at the collection level, if possible, how many inserts a day are you doing, how many updates a day are you doing, and how many deletes per day are you doing. And the best source of truth for that is the oplog. .stats in MongoDB with WireTiger, you can try to extrapolate. Deletes are well tracked. Updates are not tracked at all. They're semi-merged into inserts. So you can kind of get close with .stats if you run it a couple times. This oplog review tool has one job: connect to the oplog at a point in time you declare, run from that point to an endpoint, and then dump out by collection how many inserts, how many updates, and how many deletes it saw, and then to take the duration of the oplog it read and scale that. So if there's only an hour's worth of oplog, the best it can do is say, I saw 1,000 updates on this collection in 1 hour, so I'm going to assume I can scale that to 24 hours. If you have a couple days worth of oplogs, it's great because then it scales it down. But it's a good number to know your operations per day at the operational level, at the collection level, especially for sizing. And we have a sizing calculator that the more accurate you are with that data, the better job we can do on that initial sizing estimate.
Tim, quick time check. We have 2 minutes.
I will talk fast. CDC utility. If you need to go really, really fast in change data capture, tool that I created, multi-process, it's parallelized and highly optimized to pull the oplog from any version of Mongo that exists and turn that into inserts, updates, and deletes into a target DocumentDB server. So similar to change data capture, but highly parallelized because it's actually running as many threads as you want to throw at it. As I show here, it can do up to, I've gotten it over 20,000 operations per second. And lastly, an index review tool that's early stages. I've got some feedback from customers. This will walk all your collections, all your indexes, and make recommendations on either unused indexes or indexes that are redundant. Redundant meaning the key in the index is a subset of keys in another index. And again, just making recommendations, things you might not know about your workload. So these are upcoming works in progress, always looking for feedback, GitHub issues. Send us an email if you have an idea for a tool. Sometimes, as Cody mentioned, the best ideas often come from our customers. So that's what I got there. And thank you for your time.
Great stuff, Tim.
Yeah, this is awesome. I mean, we are already seeing value from what customers are realizing, right? So this is great. And +1 to the feedback point. So Tim, the best way to create feedback would be just to submit a issue on GitHub.
Issues are far and away the best way because then we can interact. And if it becomes a feature, you'll know when it got deployed.
Perfect. And all of this is open source. So if you guys feel like building something, this is a great opportunity. You can submit a PR. One of us would review and merge it. If you have questions, we'll reach back. So it's a great way to have that conversation going with the AWS team as well. So, just we welcome feedback as always from customers. So please do let us know how we can, improve the stuff that you're building and help us improve the stuff that we are building. that, I know we are at time. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Tim, for a great demo. A lot of great stuff there. And we'll see you again next month with a different topic. Take care, guys.
Maybe from our home base in Texas next time. See you,
That's
everybody.
right. Take care. Bye-bye.
So long.